Hello, Adele Bates here, Behaviour and Education Specialist, keynote speaker and author of Miss I Don't Give a Shit, Engaging with Challenging Behaviour in Schools. I get asked this question a lot when I am training and supporting staff in schools, especially around behaviour, and it is this: what is the key to seating plans? Now, there's a couple of kind of angles that I want to go at this at. Now, from my experience, what's really interesting is when I started teaching, I was teaching drama and dance and sometimes music. So it was really interesting because actually for years I didn't have a seating plan because we would sit in a circle and then we would act or we would dance. And I think this actually, in the weird way round, gave me a fantastic foundation to solve this question. Because then when I trained as an English teacher and I was in mainstream secondary classrooms with rows of children, being told I had to have a seating plan, and I was like, can't we all just come in and sit in a circle? I wanted to workshop it like in the studio, and it didn't work. And I had to kind of learn almost the opposite way round. PE teachers might have a similar experience, PE teachers who come indoors and do things like maths. So the key to a seating plan that works is consistency and flexibility. So let's go into this. First of all, I would love you to think of a time that you've been in some kind of workplace. If you've ever worked in an office, that's perfect. Somewhere where you have had a workplace that's perhaps a bit more stationary than teaching. And I would like you to think about, where did you get your work done best? Maybe it was when you were studying. Maybe that's another one. It could have been that you worked really well in absolute silence in the library, or maybe with your headphones on. It could have been that you worked the best when you were actually next to a friend so that you could kind of bounce ideas off every so often. It could be like me, you're a window person. I loved it. Like, I'm sitting here, I can see out my window, I can see the sky. That's really important for me. I always like to see green as well. I always need to have plants and sky. That really helps me work. You could be one of those people who likes to just be completely in the zone, not disturbed at all. You could be a person who goes to a cafe and works really well. I think you're starting to get my point. We're all different. We all work well in different scenarios, and that's really tricky to account for when there's 33 children. So this is why the consistency and flexibility can be really, really beneficial. So let's say, for example, you've got either a new class or, and this has happened to me before, or a class that you've kind of lost, a class that's gone awry. So then you have to work even harder. There is a section in my book, in the troubleshooting section, on this. So if you want to know specifically about that, look in there. But anyway, so you start with this class, this new class or this class that's gone awry, and you set up a timetable, a seating plan that you think works in your classroom. Now, there are some really practical, obvious things, like try and not have anyone facing their back to you so that they have to do weird turny head things. Go and sit in the seats in your classroom, see what it's like. There are so many people, so many teachers that I've supported who haven't done this. I'm like, do you know what it feels like to sit in the back corner? Do you know what it feels like to sit right at the front? How does it feel? An interesting way to do this, if you have got the time, is to say to the pupils one day, go to the point in the classroom that feels the comfiest and see where they go as well. So you set up a seating plan, and you might want to base it around things like splitting up friends who are going to distract each other. You might want to set it up in a way that, for example, your pupil premiums are down the aisle where you walk, so that your pupil premium children or your children with additional needs, you're more quickly able to get to them and provide intervention and support. You might want to do it like that. You might want to just do it alphabetically. I'd really suggest against doing kind of gender-based things nowadays. It's not really helpful. It doesn't really help our trans pupils or non-binary pupils. But you'll find a system, right? So you set that up. And then, here's the key, one of the keys, the consistency. The minute that they see the seating plan, 9 times out of 10, there's complaints, right? There are going to be complaints. That's okay. That's normal. Oh, miss, I don't want to sit there. Fine. So what I do is that I agree with them a time period where we trial this. And I'll say, maybe it's the first half term. Maybe it's the first month. A chunk that's enough that will let them get used to it. Now, this depends. If you're in primary and you're seeing them every day, that might be a different time scale. Whereas if you're a geography secondary school teacher and you see them once a week, obviously 6 weeks is actually only 6 lessons. So you take that call depending on your scenario. And you will find at the start there'll be a lot of complaints and there'll be a lot of trying to get out of it and trying to slightly rearrange it. I would say around lesson 2 or day 2 or 3, really keep an eye out for people who will have just swapped, or they might have just gone forward a seat, something like that. They'll have just sneakily done little things, and if you are not on it, they will have changed the seating plan without negotiating with you, right? So for that first bit, it's consistency. Absolutely. Why are you sitting one ahead? Because Laura's away today. Doesn't matter. In your place, that's the seating plan. It's about holding that boundary. And here's the flexibility key. The great thing about having a review point and sharing that with the pupils in an age-appropriate way is that they know that they can have a say. And they also know that you are holding that boundary as the teacher in the classroom. So you are giving both the authority and the it's a bit of a dangerous word to use, but the power to hold and facilitate that safe space as the teacher. And also you're being a human, because if someone puts me in the back corner away from the window, I know I'm not going to work as well. So actually, after that first half term, I might want to go to the teacher and say, actually, miss, is there any way that I can sit next to the window because I know I'll work better? Well, we've really got to come down to, and this is what it all boils down to. Do we want a rigid seating plan, or do we want kids to work well? And that's why the review point is so useful. So it gets to a review point, and you might get things like, I want to sit next to my friend. You might get things like that. Fine. You can do trials. You can do a week's trial of them sitting next to your friend. You can look at productivity versus beforehand. You can do this with them. And going back to when you're thinking about your workplace or the best way that you study, just imagine if your boss or your lecturer had said, no, the only way that you are allowed to work is in this place, sitting next to this person in silence. Now, for some of you, that will be bliss and you'll work really well, and for like half of you that would be the worst thing ever and you need your music in your ears, you know. So it's about consistency and adapting. And there's a final point I want to put onto this, and this is when we're thinking about our young people who have experienced trauma, abuse, neglect, or may have an SEMH, social, emotional, mental health issue, maybe there are safeguarding issues, etc. Unfortunately, there are children within our care, yes, in mainstream schools and more especially in special schools and alternative provision, in which they will have experienced bad things happening to them. And for some of them, for some of the pupils I work with, that's the kind of things we don't like to talk about, that humans do to each other. And sometimes some of the kids I work with, that's happened to them by their primary carer, adult, before the age of 5. And those experiences have become a trauma within them, and there will be trigger points that may bring those feelings of unsafety up again, completely understandably. And so, for example, I've worked with many students that unfortunately have been locked in rooms by primary caregivers, have been neglected, let's say, or abused in a locked room. And so putting them in the corner away from the door with the door closed, that could very easily start to trigger traumatic responses within them. Now, if you're not really familiar with how traumatic and trigger responses affect us, all humans, we all get this, then please do look at my book. Where is it? As I go into this in a lot more detail in there. So please do that. But just for now, you don't need to know the ins and outs, but just to be aware. So you can just see that it would be so much easier to just have a little quick conversation with that kid. If you might not know the ins and outs of what's happened to them, but it might be that you know they're a child in care. You might know that they've been adopted. You might know that they are going through certain mental health issues. You know, you might know something. You don't need to know more than that, but you can just go, oh, can I just check in this seating plan? Would you prefer there or there? Simple. And they can make that choice. And so in a mainstream school, there was a young person that I knew that had to be next to the door because she felt that she needed to escape. She needed to be able to escape. She never escaped from my classroom. She never went. She never had to do it. But she needed to know psychologically that she could escape in order to make her feel safe. And this comes back to an absolute key point in seating plans. If we don't feel safe, we can't learn. So the great thing about this approach of consistency and adapting is that it solves the question that lots of teachers say to me, but how can I keep it the rules and consistency for all the pupils and adapt for a kid that's got a different need? Because it's got to be the same for everyone. Equality does not mean the same. Okay, so equality as in let's make it equally available that everyone can work to the best of their ability is to set up that seating plan, to have that consistency, and to have maybe the individual conversations you might need with older kids. This is not something you need to do in front of the whole class. This is not a big song and dance. It literally could just be, oh, can you just have a look at the seating plan? Which is better for you, this one or this one? That's what it needs to be. It doesn't need to be, you've had a trauma, you need to sit, you don't need to go into it. I would love to know your thoughts, your experiences of seating plans. It's so funny, this just always comes up. Particularly if you are in the early part of your career, please feel supported and not alone in the fact that you will get it wrong. Because every single year, every single class, you are with different human beings. And so sometimes you'll get the combinations wrong. But the great thing with the consistency and adapt method is that you can account for both of those. Let me know how you've got on with this. If you want more top tips around behaviour, then jump over to my shop on adelebateseducation.co.uk, where there are several trainings about managing behaviour in the classroom, different aspects of it that you can use and download yourself at home. Thank you so much. I'd love to hear from you and all your takeaways at Adele Bates Z on Twitter, Adele Bates Z, or over on LinkedIn, Adele Bates. Thank you so much.